Welcome to Emory Grove on this very warm evening. We're happy to have you here. We had a storm come through, but we really didn't get any rain here. We got wind that knocked some of that stuff down. By the way, that is not part of her presentation. That is Vacation Bible School stuff. So, and it was wonderful today. We had over 100 kids. So it was really good, but it's very hot. So, that being said, we have our hymn sing coming up on Wednesday night, and that is Linda Wood will be here. And on Thursday we have our concert, part of the concert series, and we have basically a female barbershop quartet. So it should be wonderful, and I hope you all can come back for that. I'm going to push something else. We have our tea. We didn't have it last year. We had it one time since the pandemic, I think. And so we're back, but we're not getting all of our regulars, so to speak. So if you know of anybody who wants to come to a tea, it's wonderful, and we have fans. So just go online and click and get your tickets. We also are having a cottage tour, and this is going in two different directions here. It's on Labor Day weekend. It's Saturday of Labor Day. And we usually have about 20 cottages open. Well, right now we don't have 20 set up, but we're getting there. So any Grovers who are out there that have a cottage and haven't signed up, see me or Erin before you leave today. So it's $10, and you can pay at the door. It's actually at the block. So enough of me. Let's get to Katie Flory. She is, oh gosh, she told me, so she's going to tell you. But she is from the SPCA and is going to tell us the history of women in the SPCA. And thank you for everybody who brought donations. She also takes checks, but so do we. So we have our blue buckets around if you want to use those, or make out a check to the SPCA. Either way or both. So, Katie.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much for coming tonight. I know it is a warm one. Can everyone hear me, or do you want me to use the mic?
Microphone. I'm a biologist. You're going to use the microphone.
Okay.
But you can hold it.
I might do that because I walk around a lot.
Yeah, but you're almost at the end.
All right, I can walk a little bit. Thank you so much for having me here tonight. It's really exciting to be here. I had not been here before, and I was like, wow, this is incredible. I need to find a way to come and live with you all. As Kathy said, my name is Katie Flory. I'm the Community Care and Advocacy Director with the Maryland SPCA. I've been there almost 20 years. I started my profession there as an adoption counselor. I worked as the foster coordinator, the foster manager, the volunteer manager, the community relations director, and now the community care and advocacy director. And I was really excited when I put this presentation together because it gave me the opportunity to learn about the organization that I worked for. I knew our building was really old. I knew a lot of things happened before my time, but when I actually started learning about it, I learned so much, and I was so impressed, and I understood a lot more why I have so much passion as a woman and as an animal advocate for the animals of the Maryland SPCA. If I'm going too fast or you have any questions, please feel free, raise your hand, let me know. Sometimes I just talk. Start here. Oh, look, and it's working. Good little thing here. So before I can tell you all about the amazing women in the Maryland SPCA, I want you to know about the beginning, the history of where animal welfare comes from. And there's actually two people. We can't see that very well, can you? Hold on, let me see if I can. There we go. Everybody can see that now? Okay, much better. So I need to talk about two men before we can get to the amazing women. The first man I want to mention is Henry Berg. He actually founded the ASPCA in 1866. How many of you, by a raise of hands, have seen that sad commercial with Sarah McLachlan where you want to turn it or cry or, yes, exactly. That is not our commercial. I would like to say that commercial belongs to Henry. He is the one that started that. Animal welfare organizations tend to fall under one of two names, SPCA or Humane Society. And there's some that don't, but the majority of them do. And a lot of people think that our organization is the ASPCA. That is not the case. We are completely separate organizations. Doesn't mean that we're competition, but we might have different rules, regulations, and things like that. Henry, when he formed the ASPCA, did that because he was an ambassador in Russia, and he was watching how animals were being treated there, and he couldn't stand it. So when he came back to New York, he quit his job and decided to form the ASPCA to help the workforce. And William Woodward met Henry Berg and said, hey, I gotta do that in Maryland as well. So he formed the Maryland SPCA in 1869. He got together a group of very prominent men in Baltimore to join and become part of the Maryland SPCA. One of these names on here you may recognize right off the bat is Enoch Pratt. We all know the Enoch Pratt Library, very cool, and there's a number of other names that we can lead back to the beginning of Baltimore and a lot of the amazing things that happened in Baltimore. These people came together and said, it's not okay to treat horses the way we're watching them be treated. They wanted to make sure that they were being provided with care, that the people that owned them were making sure that they were cared for, taken care of, and made sure that they were hurt, that they were given the proper medication that they needed. Also, when they started this, they found it was really important that they needed more than just a group. They needed agents to patrol and to prevent the beatings and the pain from poorly fitted harnesses, lack of food and water, and overloaded wagons. Most of the time, people that maybe owned these horses didn't know how much a load could be, how to fit a harness. They just knew they needed to get the job done. So the Maryland SPCA came in and said, all right, we're gonna help you. We're gonna help you figure out how to do this. Also, one of the very, very cool things that they've done, and it is still today, is they started putting up fountains around the city so that when the horses were working, they had a place to go and drink. And this fountain, specifically on Calvert Street, is still there. It's really cool to go and see it. We don't have any horses drinking out of it anymore, but on a day like today, I would have jumped in it. So it's really, really nice to be able to know that not only were we wanting to make sure the horses weren't carrying too much, but they also had a place to go to get hydrated when it was really, really hot. And even on my way here today, I was thinking about doing this presentation, and I know there really wasn't air conditioning back in the 1800s. I don't know how anybody did it. I really don't. And especially the horses. So I can only think how 10 times more important it was back then than even it could be now. We also ensured that we had the first operation of the horse-driven ambulance and wagon for horses. So if a horse fell, if a horse was hurt, we had a wagon to go and pick that horse up and be able to take care of it. We also created water wagons to move around where they couldn't get to some of the fountains. We made sure that we were driving around, that we were getting all the horses the water that they needed. And then we get to my favorite woman of all time, Mary Butler Shear. Mary was born on May 12th of 1866, and her background is really interesting. She studied music in Paris, Milan, London, and at home in the Peabody Institute. She really devoted her life to two pursuits. The first one was her brother, who was a homeopathic physician. He was very well known in the community, and her other passion was animal welfare. She devoted her life to both of those. In 1897, she started her involvement with the Maryland SPCA, but not necessarily in the way that we would think, which I'll explain in a little bit. She had several roles, and she was the first chair of the animal shelter on Calverton and Lexington Streets. And I love that picture of her, but there's another one I like even better. This one. I love this picture. This picture actually still resides in the headquarters house of the Maryland SPCA. Every time I go into a meeting, I get to sit down and see it. And I think she looks a little intimidating. I do. I'm always like, okay, Mary, I got this. It's okay. But one of my favorite stories that I read about her, which is why whenever I see this picture, I'm like, okay, Mary, I'm trying to live up to your standards. She was known to berate bad owners. There's a story written about her in our history books where she saw someone whipping a horse because it had fallen and wouldn't get up, and he continued to whip the horse. She went over, grabbed the whip out of his hand, screamed at him, and walked him to the police station so that he could turn himself in for his egregious act towards that horse. It's a lady after my own heart. I always say, I've never been arrested, don't ever plan to be, but that would be the reason why. Somebody hurt an animal? I can only imagine. She had met a woman named Caroline White from Philadelphia, and Caroline had started an auxiliary section of the SPCA for women, and she decided she wanted to replicate that in Baltimore at the Maryland SPCA. So she was the person that started the Women's Auxiliary through the Maryland SPCA with women including Mrs. William Reed, Mrs. M.R. Tucker, Mrs. Howard Lloyd, you might know the name Mrs. Charles Lithicum, Mrs. Jessie Tyson, and Mrs. Frank Redford. I thought it was also extremely interesting when I was researching this, and I will tell you, one of the hardest parts of research for this was finding the women's names. None of the women, I could find their actual names. They were always listed under their husband's name, which I'm sorry guys, but that's no fun. I want to know more about the specific women. I was not able to find their names. But all of these women got together, joined in 1900, and again, went about helping the cause of the workhorse and everything that went along with it. Mary became the 8th president and the first woman president of the Maryland SPCA in 1907. But in 1906, she started the Battle of the Ballots, which went all the way to the Court of Appeals in Maryland, and it was a case regarding who was going to be the president of the Maryland SPCA. There was a man, and there was Mary. And Mary wanted to become president, and there were, I would say, discrepancies in the ballot box, so they took it all the way to the Court of Appeals, and Mary won. Yay, Mary. But it took her a while. She really wanted to do a few things. She wanted to teach the ignorant, punish the depraved and malicious offender, and advise and remonstrate with the careless and indifferent. Another thing I learned researching this is some of the language they used way back in the 1800s is not necessarily the language I would use today. So the way that I would want to go about saying this is endeavor to provide education to people who need it, or hold people accountable for their malicious offenses. And also, I don't even really know what remonstrate means. If anybody knows that, a little joke, yes I do. I would want to advise with the people that don't necessarily know what we're doing and how to go about caring for an animal. I'm not going to think of them as careless or indifferent. Maybe they just don't know. So I do have to say, as I was doing this, I was like, oh, I really don't want to use those words as I was putting it into the presentation. But I think it's also very important to know the history about how things came to be. Another word that it has bothered me the entire time, and I had to look it up and learn about it, animals were called dumb. Number one thing, they were always called dumb animals. And I was really offended by this as I'm researching this, and I'm saying this is an animal or animal welfare organization. They're discussing animals and calling them dumb. But what I learned is that phrase, dumb animals, can be applied to anything that does not have language. If you have language, you would not be considered that. So that's something I learned. Yes? I don't like those words, but nope. But yes, absolutely, that is the history of it. I prefer to call them animals cute and fluffy. And lastly, Mary was very against vivisection, and if you're not, if you don't know what that is, it is basically when animals are used for research. And Baltimore has a number of medical schools, which I'm sure you're aware of, and that was a big issue over the years in Baltimore and with the Maryland SPCA. Oh, before I go on, anybody have any questions about Mary? All right. The next woman I want to talk about is Celeste Winans Hutton. Also very Baltimore names that I've heard of different places that I go. She was born June 4th, 1823. She had an amazing education family. She became a member of the SPCA in 1945, but also her grandfather was one of the presidents as well, and his name was Guam Hutton. So it actually ran in her family as far as being a part of this organization. She chaired several committees, was the secretary in 1946, and she really represented the organization through media and relationships, which I kind of equal back to my job. I do a lot of things in the media. I do a lot of things with relationships. That's my own job, is building relationships. So it was really interesting for me to learn about her and see how the organization has grown. She was the reason we now have humane education. She made sure that our property became a historical land site, which was the Evergreen on the Falls. She made sure that the organization was prominent in the media, that people knew what was going on, and that people knew the challenges that the society was facing. She was also instrumental in creating a new kennel, and I can tell you we are still using that kennel today. Yes, it is time for us to update it, but it had really served us well since the late 70s. Also, by a raise of hands, how many of you ever went to the petting zoo? No one? Okay, one or two? Okay. That was the first thing when I started working there that I learned about. We had a petting zoo for quite a long time. In fact, in this picture, you can see a couple of the horses. You could go and you could pet them and say hi to them. And a number of animals that we had there, I believe we had peacocks and pigs and everything you can think of. This was the kennel that she built. I can tell you from here, pretty much, this entire building still stands. We now have another building in front here that we put on back in the early 2000s. This house is called the Bungalow. It is offices now. It used to be the home of the caretaker that would live on the property. No one lives on the property now. It's fully secure, but we don't have an individual that spends the night. We still use these garages. They are there for storage. A lot of what she put into place is the foundation for what we are still using today. Then we move on to Debbie Thomas. She was the executive director from 1991 to 1997. She, again, brought the organization into the future where it needed to be. She made sure, well, one of the things I learned that wasn't particularly great, I'm glad that she's fixed it, is that on Sundays in the 90s, animals weren't being fed. Nobody worked on Sundays. So that was the day that no one was fed. And when I heard this, my mouth dropped open. Like, wait a minute, what? They just were not fed. She found this out when she started as the executive director, and that was the very first thing that she changed. Animals were fed 7 days a week. She also was instrumental in our Feel the Warmth of the Cold Nose marketing campaign. We again still use that today. I have some bumper stickers over here if anybody would like one. She made sure that, again, she kept our organization relevant in the community. She developed the March for the Animals, which is our biggest fundraiser of the year, and that has kind of, through the generations and years, has changed to the Festival for the Animals and now a number of smaller events. She made it possible for us to continue to fundraise. She also made sure that staff was looked at more than just somebody coming in to pet dogs. They were doing so much more, which a lot of people in our world, like when I talk to my own family, they're like, oh, you're so lucky you get to play with cats and dogs all day. I wish I got to play with cats and dogs all day. So she really brought a professionalism to the organization so that people understood what we were here to do. Then we get to Aileen Gavey. Aileen hired me. She was the executive director from 1997 to 2015. I still talk to her on a regular basis. One of the most amazing women I have ever met. I consider her to be a mentor. During her time, she created the new building. So I showed you the old one. Behind her is the new Adoptions and Admissions Center. We used to work out of almost a double-wide trailer. One side was our adoption center and one side was the admissions. And what I always hated about that is if somebody had to come in and bring an animal, they were on one side. And if somebody else was adopting an animal, they were on the other. And those emotions never mixed. People that were making a tough decision deserve the privacy, and people that were making a really happy decision deserve to be happy. And it was really hard to keep those separate, so that new building gave us different areas to provide the services that we needed to provide to our community. She also changed our organization from an open admission shelter to an appointment-based shelter. If you're not familiar with the difference, an open admission shelter means it is government run, and they by law have to bring in every single animal. I'm sure all of you have seen in the news how Barks is really drowning in animals right now. Not we all are drowning in animals, but Barks specifically, Baltimore County Animal Services, both of those shelters are open admission, and their reality is they might get 100 animals in one day and only have 95 cages. And what does it mean for the 5 animals that don't have a cage? Whenever I say that to kids, they always raise their hand and they're like, put them in the same cage, it's fine. We can't do that. And there's 2 big reasons. Disease control. One animal's sick and we put them in a cage with another, the entire population of animals could get sick. And number 2, behavior. Animals sometimes don't get along. We would never want anything to happen. Number 3, there's also something called capacity of care, where a building, a number of staff, really by our policies and our laws within the animal welfare world, should only be able to bring in so many animals before we are over capacity. We were an open admission shelter, and when I started, I think we were euthanizing about 50% of the animals that came in. Today, I'm happy to say that our live release rate, meaning how many animals come into our shelter and how many animals leave our shelter alive, fluctuates between 92 and 96%. Can't get much better than that. We don't like to call ourselves a no-kill shelter. If people ask me, are you no-kill? Yes, I will answer, yes we are. Because the true definition of a no-kill shelter is any shelter saving over 90% of the animals that walk in their door. Does that mean that the open admission shelter is bad? No, it does not. It means we are all doing everything that we can to help as many animals as we can. But when Aileen started, she changed to an appointment-based admission shelter, meaning we're just asking someone to make an appointment with us if they need to surrender an animal. Give ourselves and them the time to figure out how to best help the animal and themselves. If they are absolutely not able to keep the animal, it's the last second, they need to bring them somewhere. If they live in the city, we will try to take them, or we will recommend that they go to Barks, which by law has to take in every animal that comes in. With that said, we do transport also, and Aileen started that as well. We go to our sister shelters, which is what we call them, which is Baltimore County Animal Services, the Baltimore Humane Society, and Barks. And between the 4 of us, we try to help each other out whenever we can. Unfortunately, we're all full right now, and that's what is really hard, because we can't help as much as we want to, but we absolutely do. Those are the first shelters we go to pull animals, to bring to our shelter, so it frees up more cage space for them. Aileen started that for our organization. Excuse me, I'm getting over a cold, but I swear I'm fine. Aileen also started the BAWA Alliance, which stands for the Baltimore Animal Welfare Alliance. It includes Humane Society, Barks, Maryland SPCA, Baltimore County Animal Services, and Baltimore City Animal Control. We get together on a bi-monthly, sometimes every 3-month basis, and we talk about the trends that are going on in our community and the different ways that we can help. One of the big things that came from that is a number of years ago, all of our shelters were euthanizing kittens with ringworm. Ringworm is contagious to humans, and we could not have animals in our care that would be able to transmit something to human beings. But we all were like, we can cure this. Why can't we do anything to help these animals? We were able to get a trailer that we put in the back of our property, and we call it the ringworm trailer. So now, we take all the ringworm kittens that come in, we treat them, and then we adopt them out. And we look at that as community life-saving. Aileen really taught us, along with the other directors at that time, that it is a community. It takes the community to save these animals. Not one of our shelters is going to be able to make the difference, but if we can all work together, we really can. And we figured out a way to solve that problem, which I'll tell you how we're going to solve the next problem. And then lastly, she really put together a strong leadership team. She knew what we needed to make sure that we were improving on our fundraising and on our marketing, and even on our finances. So she really did wonderful things while she was with us. And our today's leadership, I am lucky enough to work under Jessica Lancelotti. She has been with us since about 2012. She started as our finance director, and then she now became our executive director. She started last July and has been wonderful working for her. The other woman that I work for, which might sound odd, but I do, I work for Baltimore City as well, is Sharon Colburn. She is the director of Baltimore City Animal Control. I also have the privilege to be on the Dangerous Dog Hearing Board in Baltimore City, which is basically a board that comes together when there is a serious dog bite to another animal or to a human, or we need to then make a decision on what needs to happen with that animal. Sharon, being the head of animal control, is my boss for that, but I've also had the privilege of working with her throughout the years when I was the chair of the Baltimore City Mayor's Anti-Animal Abuse Advisory Commission. Our role there was to provide recommendations to the mayor, and I've been through a lot of mayors in the city on what can be done to stop animal abuse in Baltimore City. I think we really tried to get a lot of things done, and unfortunately COVID really messed that up, but I think it messed everything up for everyone. What's going on today with horses? So I wanted to mention this because we talked a lot about how our organization really took the lead on making sure that horses were being taken care of, and especially the women of the SPCA. And that is still true today, but in a little bit of a different form. We used to have the animal control contract, which meant we were the ones, meaning the SPCA, was going out and picking up stray animals and bringing them back to the shelter and doing everything that Barks is doing now. We gave up that contract in, I believe, the late 50s because of vivisection. The city came to the Maryland SPCA and said, hey, thanks for everything you've been doing, but now you have to, by law, give all of your stray animals to the different medical schools around the city, and they are going to use them for however they want to. And Celeste, at that time, said, oh, no, you're not, and fought it. And we lost, and at that point, we said, well, then we give up the contract. So then it went back to the city, and the city had to do its own thing for many, many years until Barks was created, which was, again, I believe around 2005, 2004. Jen Browse came in. She is still the executive director, another amazing woman who created that organization and went from, I believe, euthanizing close to 90% of the animals that were coming in, and now they are up to about an 85 to 90% live release rate. So again, another amazing woman who really helped in the animal welfare organizations and was a leader and is a leader. But today, we still have A-robbers in the city, and I will say, talking to many different people, I have learned that a lot of people have strong feelings about the A-robbers, some negative, some positive. Baltimore City Animal Control does ensure that their horses are properly cared for. They inspect their stalls and their different places that they are kept. They make sure that city horse regulations are up to par. The rest of the horses in Baltimore City, really you're not allowed to because they're not on space, but the Department of Agriculture handles the rest of that and ensuring that horses around the state are being cared for. There is also another organization, the Horse Council, that does quite a bit in ensuring legislation and making sure that the horses are being cared for. And lastly, what do we do today? So throughout the history, I've told you about a number of women who have done a number of different things, and it's all led us here today. We spay and neuter over 3,000 animals a year, at least. We make sure that animals are going home. We find adoptions every day for them. Over 3,000 animals find new and forever homes. Pet retention, that is really the newest and biggest thing that we are working on. I don't want anybody's animal to have to come to my shelter. And there is a school of thought of, well, if you don't have enough money, you shouldn't be allowed to have an animal, or if you can't take care of it, you shouldn't be allowed to have an animal. Things happen. We know that. We want to ensure that we can do what we can to help keep that animal in the home so it never has to come to a shelter. I feel like I have one of the few jobs in this world where I actually want my boss to come in and say, hey, Katie, all the animals are saved, you're fired. That would be the best day of my life. The only way it's going to happen is through all of this. I want to keep the animals in the homes. We do that through Kibble Connection, which is a pet food pantry that we provide supplemental pet food assistance for anyone that needs it. We have our Paw Plus clinics, where we ensure that free veterinary care or wellness care is given to anyone that needs it. We do those about 9 months out of the year. We also have a domestic violence program where someone is working with a domestic violence agency and needs to leave a situation. We will take their animal into protective custody for 40 to 65 days while that person is getting the help they need and able to get to a safe place. During my time with the organization, I have learned over and over again that there is absolutely a correlation between violence towards animals and violence towards people. If we can stop the violence towards the animal, hopefully they never get to the person. But I also know in the domestic violence lens, an abuser will absolutely try to hurt that animal if they think it will keep that person with them. So it's really important that we're able to hide that animal, for lack of better words. When we bring it in, we rename it, nobody knows who it is, and we make sure that we're working with another organization because we don't even want the victim to know where the animal is. It needs to be safe on all fronts. We also have our foster care program. We put about 1,500 animals through our foster care program every year. These are your babies, these are your sick animals, these are your animals that just need to get out of the shelter for a little bit. There's any number of reasons why foster care is important. And I did hear that maybe some of you guys here foster. Anybody? Do I know anybody here? All right, got one in the back. Awesome. You are a true lifesaver. And if you didn't know that, fostering is, I like to say, the most direct way that you can save a life. Take an animal in for a short amount of time while they rest, recuperate, or give us time to make space for that animal to come in. With our foster care program, we provide you 24-hour support. We provide you all the supplies that you need. A lot of people think, oh, I have to keep the animal until it's adopted. No, you can bring him back or her back, and we'll put them up for adoption whenever they're ready. So it's a great way to have an animal short term if that's something you're interested in, but it is 100% life-saving for every animal that goes into foster care. Volunteers, one of them, well, let me say that, they are the backbone of our organization. We have close to 1,000 volunteers who do any number of things. Laundry, dishes, help in surgery, help in the exam room, dog deputies. They socialize with our dogs and show them to potential adopters. Cat cuddlers where are kitty cats. We have nursery nannies that spend time with the babies. We have volunteers that help with events. Pretty much any way you can think, we have volunteers that help with that. And without them, we would not be able to do the job that we do. Our budget a year is about $7 million, and volunteers alone provide about $2 million on top of that. So it is life-saving and incredible. And lastly, legislation. That's one of my true passions. I spend a lot of time between January and April in Annapolis, talking to our legislators, making sure that our laws are as stiff as they should be. A lot of people will talk to me and they'll be like, I hate animal abuse and I wish we could do something to stop it. Unfortunately, the laws that we have in place don't allow us to really do what I think the common sense in people tells us we should. So I'm trying to do my best to get laws passed so that we can stop that. An example of one that we worked very, very hard on, specifically in Baltimore City, and then I believe it went statewide, was making dog fighting instruments illegal. We all know dog fighting is illegal, but dog fighting is also very difficult to find. It is sort of the hidden crime. Oftentimes, the dogs are kept in abandoned houses, the people are never there, you can't get them. The instruments, they needed to be illegal as well so that when you find those, you can hold that person accountable. Does that make sense? Okay. And my favorite pictures, this is a picture of our pet food pantry, a group of our staff in spay and neuter, and a little puppy, because we have lots of little puppies that come in. Partners also are important. Days End Horse Rescue. If you have not had the opportunity to visit them, visit them. They are the coolest place. They're near Mount Airy. They pretty much anytime there is some type of horse neglect or abuse case, Days End is involved. They take the horses in, they rehabilitate them. They really just do incredible things to help make sure the horses are cared for and are treated kindly. And then our second partner is the Maryland Horse Council, who I spoke about earlier, and PAWS. PAWS is the Professional Animal Workers Society. They are a group of all of the shelter directors around the state of Maryland that meet on a quarterly basis to, again, talk about trends, what's going on, what is the support that our animal control officers need, what is the support that our shelters need, and what can we do together. And I'm going to let you in on a little secret that nobody knows yet, because it's coming out soon. We are going to be doing a promotion this summer with the other 4 shelters specifically, but inviting all the shelters around the state to get involved. You've heard me say a few times how full we are. We are all full, to the point where people in shelters are making decisions on whether we have to euthanize healthy animals. We haven't had to do that in easily 10 years. It's pretty bad. So we need to figure out a way to save lives and save them quickly. So we're gonna put a promotion together. In the past, we did it for cats and kittens because summer is really, really hard for cats and kittens. Everybody loves kittens, right? No? Because you all are going home with one tonight. No, I'm kidding. You didn't know that? Everybody leaves with a kitten. No, kittens are great. But honestly, if I never saw another one, it would be fine with me. There are too many of them. And summer is a really, really hard time for shelters with cats and kittens on a regular basis. We're not seeing that as much this year. We're seeing dogs is our issue this year. But we developed a promotion a few years ago called the Maryland 2000, a race to save lives, where around the entire state of Maryland, shelters would sign on, and we would provide free adoptions to anybody interested in a cat or a kitten. They received a free exam from a local veterinarian. They received everything that they would normally receive. We just wouldn't ask for the adoption fee. And we reached that total year after year after year. We stopped it during COVID because people couldn't get together, and we really didn't need it because animals were not coming into shelters. Now they all are. So we needed to get together and say, what are we going to do? So in the next couple of weeks, we will be putting out a new Maryland something. I'm not sure if it's going to be 3,000 because we're going to include dogs and puppies in it, so that we can try to help the entire state of overrun shelters with animals find these animals new homes, so that we are not having to make really tough decisions. And when I think about this, I go back to some of the pioneering women who really thought outside of the box. And the Baltimore 500, which was how the Maryland 2000 started, came from the Bow Wow Alliance, which at that point was all women, which is really cool to also know about and then know this is where it's led us to be. And that's me. As I said, I'm the Community Care and Advocacy Director. I've been with the shelter for 20 years. I started my career in broadcast journalism. I worked in radio promotions for a couple of years, hated what I was doing, quit my job, and literally drove to the SPCA like, maybe I'll get a job here. And I have now been here for almost 20 years. I am extremely passionate about it. I could talk about animals all day long, but I could also talk about these women all day long, because they really have taught me about the woman that I want to be, the difference that I want to make in animal welfare. And what I found in this organization is, and I think it's in everything, with our field, you feel like you take one step forward and then 2 steps back. But watching what all of these women did for our organization has taught me, it doesn't matter, I'm going to keep taking that one step because we're going to get there. And even if we're able to help one animal, that's one more animal than we've been able to help before. Do you guys have any questions for me? Yes?
I was wondering how the percentage of pit bull type dogs is going up and down.
So the question was, what do you think the percentage of pit bull type dogs is looking like? Is it going up? Is it going down? I think it's staying the same. And to me, it's higher. People have, again, it's sort of, as I was saying before, people have strong feelings about certain things. People have strong feelings about pit bulls one way or the other. I will admit to you, I have 7 dogs. All 7 of them are bullies, and give me a pit bull any day. I think they are amazing dogs. What frustrates me is that people sometimes adopt animals that they don't know what they're adopting, and they don't understand the socialization that any animal needs. And believe me, if the one type of dog that I'm scared of is Chihuahuas. Like, give me a pit bull any day. Those little Chihuahuas, they'll get you. But it's also just important in general to know the type of dog that you're adopting and what the needs of those dogs are, which sort of goes back to one of our policies. We're not here to tell someone they can't have an animal. We're here to help them find the right match for them. We want to learn about them, we want to learn about the animal, and then make the right match in between the two. Does that answer your question? They do. They need training, but I will say, again, I will say any dog needs training. They need a responsible owner. And I think that's the most important thing. A lot of what we do at the shelter is try to provide information. And I want you guys to know I'm specifically saying information instead of education, because I find the minute I tell someone I'm going to educate them, they're like, oh, you're gonna do what? Nope, just gonna give you information and you decide what you want to do with that information. I've also had people that say to me, specifically the cats, of like, they've never owned a cat, you shouldn't adopt them out. Oh, yes, I will. They're the best people ever. They're a blank slate. I can tell them exactly how to do it, and just no preconceived notions. So it's pretty cool. Other questions? Yes.
Sometimes on my phone, I see these pitiful ads for senior dogs. Is there a program? Is there something that you do for senior dogs?
So that's a good question. We adopt out any animal, no matter what age it is, as long as it is mentally and physically healthy. So we talked a little bit earlier about our live release rate, because that's what we look at, and that's 92 to 96%. It doesn't matter if an animal is a year old or 15 years old. If they are mentally and physically stable, we're going to adopt them out. Do we promote them differently? Yeah, maybe a little bit. We just started a new program called Forget-Me-Nots, and that is a program that we're trying to help animals that maybe don't stand out a little bit more. We used to have the program, and Forget-Me-Nots took over this. It was Lucky 7, and it was any animal over the age of 7 years old wouldn't have an adoption fee attached to them at all. We have also, I go regularly to Charlestown Retirement Community to do talks with them, and we're sort of in the talks about, hey, could we do something together, and matching senior pets with senior citizens that might be interested. But it also needs to be the right time for everybody. So I would say we try not to, in an adoption setting, to look at age as anything different. We can still help them find homes. We found 17-year-old cats homes before. Yeah. Yes?
I have two questions. The
Sure.
first one I thought of while you were answering that question, and that is, do you ever get concerned about people not having enough money to afford their animals if they can't afford the adoption fee?
It's a really good question, and we could be here all night, and we can talk afterwards too, but here's how I'm going to answer it. So I developed our Kibble Connection program. I've been running it now for about 5 years, and during COVID, I ran it in the parking lot. I was literally putting food on the driveway in A, B, C, D and saying, come and pick it up. I would watch the Lexus pull up, I would watch the Mercedes, the Tesla, whatever. And a lot of the people around me would be like, they don't need this help. And what dawned on me one day, and this is why I stopped thinking about it. I have no idea if that car is even theirs. I don't know if it's going to be repossessed tomorrow. I don't know if they lost their job yesterday. I know nothing about anybody else's life. What I do know is that they're asking us for help. So on that end, I try not to judge people for anything other than how they are going to care for this animal. I also am kind of leading to that question as well. We do talk about the cost of care for an animal when someone comes in to adopt. But what may be true for me today may not be true for me tomorrow, and I have no way to know that. So I don't want to judge someone or stop an animal from having the most amazing opportunity to bond with this human by deciding if that person can pay for that animal today or tomorrow. We want to be here to ensure that they can stay with their family and be the last safety net in case they can't. I hope that answers it. In your second one?
Yeah,
Yeah.
So the second one is, I'm on social media and I see about
Mhm.
dog fighting and that cat being used or kitten being used as bait. So I end up posting and probably bothering everyone and
Mhm.
saying, please be conscientious of who you are giving your cat to because the animals are used as dog fight bait.
Absolutely.
How do you?
So a couple of things, depending on, and I see them too. There's a lot of scammers out there too, I have noticed. I mean, they always put the cutest animal up and like, hey, come and adopt this animal, and then all of a sudden it turns into a scam. I think first of all, you have to be careful on social media, no matter what you're doing. I think you're doing absolutely the right thing. Whenever someone wants to give an animal away, I always recommend that they contact an organization called Rescue Well. They're a wonderful organization in the community that help stem the flow of animals coming into shelters. Their purpose really is to make sure that animal doesn't have to come in, so they can help whoever's trying to find that cat a home, the resources to make sure they're doing it correctly. Also, if you're truly worried about it, I would call animal control, and I would make them aware. Like if you're seeing that same name over and over and over again, let somebody know. And let me, hold on, back up for a second. The other thing, animal control in the city and animal control in the county know my name more than anybody else's. And if you looked under my name and how many animals I have reported to them, it's probably thousands. So, if you're nervous about ever reporting something, you call me and I'll report it. Because it can go under my name and I never have to worry about it. It's always good to have an address or a name or a screenshot of whatever you're doing. And I can't promise 100% what they're going to do, but it's always better if I go with the, if you see something, say something. Yes, in the back?
Yes, I have a few questions. So
Sure.
on fostering, how, because I've read about where you take them for the weekend or a week. Do you offer that?
Yep.
So they can just get out of the shelter and get
100%.
supplies and, okay.
Yep.
Because I wasn't sure how long we have, all of our pets have always been adopted through shelter.
Mhm.
We have 2 cats and a dog. So then if you said we wanted, foster for a week, or you would just make sure that whatever dog or cat you're giving was suitable
Mhm.
for a multi-animal.
We will. Now, I will say, and if anybody in any rescue or shelter tells you differently, I wouldn't believe them. I can never tell you 100% how any animal's going to do in a home environment.
Just knowing, because like when we
Yep.
got our dog, they said that, she was good with other animals.
Mhm.
So that, okay.
Yep, we will absolutely do our best to give you every piece of information on the animal. We actually, within our foster network, we send out a list, so you see exactly, you kind of pick like, oh, I could take this one for the weekend, or I could take this one for a week, or however long. And it'll say what the animal really needs. Like sometimes we have animals that just are waiting to get a dental, that need a place to go. We have had a dog that came in recently. His name is Lariat, and he was actually found in Druid Hill Park, tied to a pole. He doesn't know how to be a dog. Doesn't know how to be a dog at all. He's scared to death of people, but if another dog is around, he's like, okay, I can do it. He needs some time out of the shelter. So just thinking in my head, yes, there's always something that can fit.
And then what's the average, I'd say, time to adopt in some of these shelters? I was like, are there campaigns where there might be a dog? I remember when I was younger, we adopted a dog. We always said, okay, who's been here the longest? And make sure it was a good fit. But are there certain, like you were saying, like especially with dogs now, that the shelters are overrun? Is it?
So we don't really do a promotion like that, but you could still come in, and our staff, we know the animals. And you could simply say, well, who's been here the longest? And they're going to say, well, this guy's been here for quite a while. And the other thing I think is important for you guys all to know, and this leads back to the history as well, I would say 90% of the time, animals end up in shelters because of people issues, not their issues. It tends to be the human beings that have the issues, not the animals. So yes, people will say, well, why has that dog been here for so long? There's no rhyme or reason to what animal sits longer than what animal goes the next day. I will say small dogs, always going to go the next day. We can't keep small dogs in our shelter longer than a day or two. That is not an issue. It is our bigger guys, our pit bulls, things like that. Sorry, I think you had a question? Yep.
I seem to remember, I think it was a state law that said that pit bulls were presumptively dangerous and caused quite a problem with insurance and with landlords wanting to exclude.
We got rid of that law.
That repealed.
Yes, it is. I'm very happy I was involved in that. Makes me happy. Yes. What it basically said, and it was a case where boy was attacked by a pit bull, and the family basically wanted to get the medical bills paid for, and they weren't able to because they filed bankruptcy, insurance wouldn't do anything, so it went through the court system, and the court system came back and said, well, pit bull is inherently dangerous. My challenge with that to everyone is, who knows what a pit bull is? That's like saying all redheads are going to behave in a certain way. I want to, I'm right there with you. I like to say that every animal is an individual. Again, I have 7 bullies at home. I have 4 Old English bulldogs, 1 who knows what kind of bulldog, 1 French bulldog, and another, I think he's a Staffordshire Terrier. The problem dog is the French bulldog, not any of the other ones. My little Frenchie, oh, she's a little nightmare. She's just awful. I love her to death, but she's awful. So it is not the breed. I think it is very much the dog itself, and that's why it's important to learn personalities, provide socialization, provide training. Does anybody know what pit bulls were initially bred to do? No, not fight. Yes, they were bred to be nanny dogs. They love children, they love their families. Notoriously, they don't necessarily get along with other animals, which was why they have been the choice of fighting breeds. But I can also introduce you to 2,000 pitties that absolutely love other animals. We have to start looking at all animals as individuals and not as the breed, and that is what we did when we repealed that law, and saying you can't say one type of dog, which you can't even tell what it is, because there actually is no such thing as a pit bull. There's a Staffordshire Terrier, there's the French Bulldog, there's so many different bullies, but there is no breed of a pit bull. Yes?
What do you see the next big issue?
Housing. Housing is what we really need to go after. We partner a lot with Maryland Votes for Animals and the Humane Society of the United States. If anybody's interested in getting involved, check those 2 groups out. We have a problem with there's not enough housing for people with animals. And we are seeing many more animals come into shelters because people can't find a place to live and take their dog or cat with them. I'm a fan of like, if you can take your child, why can't you take your dog? But apartments don't look at that in the same way. I'm really trying to find different apartment groups to start working with to say, hey, look, I get your challenges. I understand that it is insurance. I understand that it is what is right for the entire community. But let's work together, because the Maryland SPCA would be more than happy to help apartment complexes and people that live there make sure their pets are up to date on vaccines, make sure they're getting the training, the behavior work they need, helping them to stop the dog that is barking 24 hours a day, every day in the apartment complex. Yes?
Working with like apartment complexes, or is it a state?
It's a state thing, but we got to start small. It's sort of the way that I look at it, is we can start one place, it grows from there. And there is definitely the want to do it. It seems that the issue is the insurance part of things, and I think if we can find a way around that, we can find some middle ground to work on, but we need to make sure that we're helping people keep their pets with them, and that's one of the biggest ways. I would also say that we really need to hold animal abusers accountable more than they're being held accountable. Very few times would anyone who is convicted of animal abuse put in jail, and they need to be. But that is not something where the court system really looks and says, okay, well, you're found guilty, but we can just put you on probation. In my eyes, they should be put in jail, because I can promise you they're going to hurt a person next. You get over here, and then I'll come back over here. Yes? Yes.
If you're Maryland SPCA, does that mean that moved the law that you said, let's know more about pit bulls is a statewide thing?
Except for counties. So PG County that's a county ordinance, not a state. So all the other counties, we're good, because the state law says no. But PG County has their own ordinance that says pit bulls are not allowed. That's why all the other shelters take their dogs, so that they don't have to euthanize pit bulls. But also, I mean, I've seen it over and over again where we'll get a list of animals from PG that we're looking at taking, and I see animals on there and I'm like, that is not a pit bull. But somebody decided it was, so now it has to go. So, and we've worked quite hard to try to get that repealed too. It'll come. It's just going to take some time. And yeah.
Oh, thanks. First off, on the pit bulls, my daughter has two moving also that are puppies, and puppies being 2 and 3 years of age that are full of themselves. They're male. They are the biggest chicken dogs I have ever seen in my life, honestly, because they are hysterical and a lot of fun to be around. They knock grandma down because they get so excited. And you have 2 of them attacking you, it's like 70-some odd pounds each dog coming at you. So, you know, learn your balance good around them, but they have a lot of fun. Secondly, I've adopted 2 puppies from Paul, and they advised me that basically any puppy you adopt anywhere will have some pit bull in them.
Yeah,
I
it's
have
good.
2 questions.
Yeah.
First one, on your foster care, do you put the foster care people in some kind of training before you're giving them the dogs?
Yes, we have an orientation process that everybody goes through, and we're big fans of continuing education. So we try to provide foster parents more and more information and education different ways. But yeah, everybody goes through an orientation. Everybody learns our policies and procedures of what we expect. And there is always going to be a trust factor. We know we've got to work with our community, and we trust our community to help the animals that we're giving them.
The second thing is, when the pandemic was going on, you did not have a big influx of animals coming in at that time, because I know everybody was adopting dogs because they were staying home. But then when they had to start going back to work, and they also realized they couldn't handle the dogs at this point, that they were more responsibility than what they thought they were going to be, did you have a bigger influx coming in as soon as that started happening?
Not really. And as I've been talking to different people in the state, none of us have seen that. What we're seeing is financial issues. We're seeing the fallout from COVID is a lot of people lost their jobs. They aren't back to where they were, and they're being forced to either move and can't take their animal, or making financial decisions that mean, am I going to pay my electric bill, or am I going to take my dog to the vet? Or am I going to pay for my daycare, or I'm going to feed my dog? And that's where we're trying to come in and say, okay, let's provide free wellness care. Let's provide food so that you don't have to make that choice. We aren't seeing as much, unless that's not what they're telling us. We do ask for surrender reasons, and again, it seems to be financial. The other thing I'm seeing, and I do a lot of community clinics in under-resourced communities, I'm seeing more puppies than I ever saw before, and that is because people are breeding and they're selling, because it is a way to make money, because they don't have any money. And as much as that frustrates me, I can't blame anybody. They gotta figure out how to support their family, and if this is a way to support their family, okay, but I don't love it, because my whole goal is to spay and neuter every animal I ever find. So that's a hard one, and you know, a lot of things that I've said to you tonight have taken me 20 years to learn. I came into this field like, nope, every animal's gonna be saved, and if you don't have enough money, you're not adopting from me, you're not gonna do any of this. And then I learned over the years that I'm an idiot, first of all, that that's not gonna help any animals. All that's gonna do is push people into making bad decisions. And the worst decision, the one thing that I cannot tolerate, I can't watch it on TV, I can't see it, I can't even think about it, is the car that opens the door and just lets the animal out on the side of the road. It just makes me physically ill. And some of our volunteers will even kind of make comments under their breath when someone's bringing an animal in. And I always kind of stop them and I'm like, wait a minute, they didn't have to come here. They didn't have to surrender this animal to us. They are doing what they know to be right by that animal, instead of doing some of the other things that I've talked about before. So judgment is a big thing for us that we don't do. We don't want to judge people. It is about the animal, and we don't know what anybody else's life is really like.
Well, thank you for all that you're doing for the animals, because
Thank you.
they're not able to speak for themselves or fend for themselves. So thank you.
I just posted that on Facebook and said, I wish my voice was louder. There was a part, yes.
So it's not only your organization, but all the other organizations, if they adopt from one of your centers, they have to be spayed or neutered.
Yes. Yep. Everybody we give out is spayed or neutered.
Are they chipped too?
Yes, everybody's chipped as well, spayed and neutered. In our shelter, I can't speak for what everybody does in every other shelter. I know they're all spay neutered. We provide everybody's shots for the amount of time they're with us. So for example, if you adopted a 2-month-old kitten, they're not old enough for a rabies shot yet, so they wouldn't have that. If you're adopting a year-old animal, they're gonna have every shot they need for the next year. They're gonna be chipped, we send you home with food, we send you home with information, kind of everything that you're gonna need to start things off. We do partner with SPCA, which is a local veterinarian around the state, and they provide up to $250 for the first visit to that, to get you started off with a relationship with a vet. Yes?
I just wanted to talk a little bit about no-kill shelter.
Yes.
Because I'm a volunteer for a no-kill shelter for
Okay.
about 20 years, cat shelter.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I often think of is we're often at capacity.
Mm-hmm.
But who can count cats anyway? But
That's true.
one
That's very
of the-
true.
one of the issues with it is if you're in a no-kill shelter, you feel like you're volunteering for like a nursing home for cats because they stay no matter what their physical condition is. And then you can't serve the community by taking in more. So it
You're right.
stops.
You're very right, and that is why, first of all, I think as a community, we have to get rid of those words. We have to get rid of the words no-kill. The general community thinks when somebody says they're a no-kill shelter, they never euthanize. And honestly, if you are never euthanizing an animal, how many animals are suffering? That's not okay with us, and that's why I always say mentally and physically stable. We will euthanize an animal if it is suffering and it has no hope of a quality of life. And I wish we could do that for people. It's just my belief. I talk about our live release rate, and that's what I want people to know. I want people to know how many animals are coming into a shelter and how many of those animals are leaving alive. It doesn't always mean through adoption. It may mean through a rescue organization. It might mean that they were reclaimed by their owner if they came in lost. So it could be any number of reasons. And I have to say, I completely agree with you. I don't know what sanctuary you work with. I will say, cat sanctuaries, oh, we love y'all. We do. We do. But I understand from the other end that it can be very, very challenging because you are at capacity. And as we talked about with the capacity of care, it's kind of like, whoa, what's one more? But when you keep saying what's one more,
I know.
then,
We do hold up parks.
okay, which, do you know where?
It's animal rescue team.
Okay, yes, I know you guys, yep.
So we take in identified cats
Mhm.
and monitor them.
Yes, which is awesome. Awesome. Do I have to stop talking now? Well, guys, thank you so much. And one other thing I just wanted to say, thank you for all of this. It will go to very, very good use. It's a pleasure to be here tonight, and thank you for sticking through all this heat with me.